Tsai Ing-wen hails her visit to Eswatini a success, but there was one topic that was strictly off limits during the trip. The latest minimum wage hike is out, but falls short of what labor groups have been campaigning for. Also ahead,
India is getting ready to host the G20 summit here in New Delhi, but can Narendra Modi stop deep divisions from hampering the event?
Plus, Taiwan has a perfect record as it goes into the U18 Baseball World Cup Super Round. What do they need to do to win it all? Warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Leslie Liao. President Tsai Ing-wen is back home after a state visit to Eswatini. At the airport, Tsai said her trip showed Taiwan's dedication to playing a strong role in the international community.
那么，另外，透过这次的出访，我们再次向世界展现，即使台湾面临艰难的国际处境，但是我们依然选择脚踏实地的跟各国交朋友，用真诚和坚定做外交。
Tsai had been on a 4-day trip to Eswatini, marking 55 years of ties between Taiwan and its only remaining ally in Africa. While she was there, the two countries signed deals on funding women entrepreneurs and building a fuel storage facility. Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen has just wrapped up her state visit to the southern African nation of Eswatini. The country, formerly known as Swaziland, is Africa's last remaining absolute monarchy. And many there are hoping Taiwan can speak out for democracy in the country. Ed Moon brings us this report.
On the final day of President Tsai's state visit to the landlocked African nation of Eswatini, and just as with everywhere she's gone the last 3 days, she gets an enthusiastic welcome. But there's one topic that's been strictly off limits: any discussion of the local politics. Eswatini's an absolute monarchy, the last of its kind in Africa. King Eswatini has been in power for almost 40 years, and he directly appoints the head of the country's government. Political parties were banned in 1973, and while there are elections to the lower house of parliament, the king appoints many of its members. That's to say, in Eswatini, what the king says goes.
The king has got all the powers that you can think of in any normal state. So that would be executive powers, that would be judicial powers, as well as legislative powers. On top of that, the king is actually above the law.
In 2021, Eswatini saw widespread pro-democracy protests calling for a reduction in the king's power and to give parliament more say. The government responded by cracking down on demonstrators, with dozens killed in the unrest. It succeeded in getting people off the streets, but has done little to alter their desire for change.
And what we want specifically is that there must be a constitutional changes in Swaziland, a new constitutional dispensation, in terms of which there will be multi-party democracy. We also do not understand why our message should not resonate with the people of Taiwan, because as we know it, Taiwan is a democracy. And I don't think that Taiwan should be assisting a despot to suppress human rights.
All of which leaves Taiwan in a difficult position. President Tsai has made Taiwan's commitment to freedom and democracy a central part of her bid to build her country's international profile and appeal to Western democracies. But none of those countries recognize Taipei.
This is the dilemma, the Maoduan, shall we say, of Taiwan's foreign policy efforts. The countries that it still has formal bilateral relations with tend to be small, in many cases not well run, in some cases autocratic. And that is in direct tension with the push to develop more robust relationships with the liberal democracies of the world.
Taiwan is isolated diplomatically because China claims sovereignty over the country. And that leaves Taipei faced with difficult choices. To keep its few remaining official allies, 13 in total, it needs to show there are benefits to not switching ties over to Beijing. And that might include turning a blind eye to the poor human rights record in countries such as Eswatini. But that contrast with Taiwan's stated commitment to liberal, democratic values is starker than ever. leaving Tsai, seen as a global champion of democracy, faced with questions she'd prefer not to answer. James Lin, John Su, and Ed Moon for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's minimum wage has been raised by $32 per month, but no one's really happy with that amount. Eric Gao reports.
Taiwan's Labor Ministry announced that the 2024 minimum wage will increase to $856 per month. That's a rise of $32. But some business and labor representatives say the decision did not take their interests into account.
所有的最后的结论都是专家学者跟政府官员做决定。我们资方的诉求也不会被接受，劳方的诉求也不会被接受。
The 4% increase is much higher than business owners had expected, as it puts pressure on their expenses. But it's still $17 short of what labor groups were calling for.
低薪是国耻，低薪是国耻，基本工资要提高，基本工资要提高。
Ahead of the meeting, labor groups gathered outside the ministry to voice their demands. They wanted the minimum wage to rise to $935 per month, a figure President Tsai Ing-wen said was her dream number in 2017. Labor Representative Zhang Jianxing says it's a standard set by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development.
OECD 都已经提到了28,111块就是一个低薪的一个家庭我认为说不应该再让整个台湾的劳工大家处在一个这个低薪国家之内
Taiwan's minimum wage in 2013 was around $600. It has increased every year since 2016 by about 5%, but overall growth in the past decade has only been about $230. That growth barely covers high inflation. Impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic and the war in Ukraine, Taiwan's consumer price index last year hit a 14-year high. Labor rights groups say it makes more sense to base the minimum wage increase on inflation, and they say change needs to happen before President Tsai steps down.
在立法院最后一个会期，要把这个最低工资法入法，不要让我们劳工每年来上街头。
While the minimum wage increase will help ease the strain of inflation for laborers, there's still a long way to go for a full economic recovery. Alex Chen, Yujing Huang, and Eric Gao for TaiwanPlus.
To hear more about Taiwan's minimum wage hike and what it could mean for the country's politics, reporter Rick Glauert spoke to fair wage advocate Roy Ngern.
Could I just ask you your reaction to today's minimum wage increase announcement?
I think the minimum wage increase is quite disappointing. It is only about $1,000 increase. The labor unions have been calling for the minimum wage to be increased to $28,000. And if you look at the cost of living in Taiwan, in order to be able to afford the basic necessities in Taiwan, it would need to be about $35,000 or $40,000. This is accounting for rent. As well, increase the minimum wage to only about $27,400. That is still too low for the basic standard of living in Taiwan.
And Taiwan has a relatively low minimum wage and a relatively low wages in general for a developed country. What does that mean for Taiwan, its economy and its people?
What businesses have been saying is that the minimum wage should not be increased by more than 2% because they say that the expected GDP growth is only going to be less than 2% for this year. But by not allowing the minimum wage to grow faster, the impact is that this will not allow domestic consumption to grow faster. It would not allow the profits of domestic businesses to grow faster as well. And if you look at the past 20 to 25 years after Taiwan's minimum wage has stagnated, so has its domestic profits and so has its GDP. So with this minimum wage growing to only about $27,470, this means that it is not high enough to be able to support the domestic consumption needed to boost the growth of domestic businesses as well as the economy.
President Tsai Ing-wen and her ruling Democratic Progressive Party had made some promises about reaching certain levels of minimum wage during their office, which it looks like now they're failing to meet. What could that mean for politics in Taiwan?
When President Tsai Ing-wen came into power, she had at one point said that she would want the minimum wage to be increased to $30,000. Clearly, the minimum wage increase to $27,470 is far short of the $30,000 that President Tsai had promised. In fact, presidential candidate Ho Yu-yi from Kuomintang also announced today that he would increase the minimum wage to $33,000 in his term. This far surpasses what the DPP has promised. Well, Taiwan's elections have been mainly fought along the lines of national security and the threat that it faces from China. But what is quite different this year is that young people who have felt neglected because of the low wages and the high housing prices in Taiwan have decided to vote to support one of the third parties.
That was Rick Lauert speaking to fair wage advocate Roy Nguyen about Taiwan's minimum wage hike. Mobile chip company MediaTek has developed its first chip using semiconductor giant TSMC's advanced 3nm technology. MediaTek's chipset is set to hit the market next year. It's designed for use in smartphones and intelligent cars, among other devices. This is a breakthrough for the company, which outsources production of its designs. MediaTek now joins Apple in gaining access to TSMC's highly guarded advanced 3nm technology. Demand for these chips is expected to rise. North Korea says it's launched its first operational tactical nuclear attack submarine and will begin patrols around the Korean peninsula. State media in the country reported leader Kim Jong-un at the launch ceremony urging the Navy to continue upgrading its existing submarine fleet with nuclear weapons. This is part of North Korea's plans to develop a nuclear-armed Navy to counter the United States and its Asian allies. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has said the United States is trying to isolate Russia in the Indo-Pacific region.
Конечно же, это имеет одной из главных задач сдерживание Китая, изоляцию России в этом регионе, но это часть абсолютно глобального процесса экспансии НАТО во главе с Вашингтоном.
Lavrov made the comments on a landmark visit to Bangladesh. He's the first Russian foreign minister to travel there since its independence in 1971. Russia and Western countries are seeking Bangladesh's support. The South Asian country has been reluctant to take a side in Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Leaders of the world's most powerful economies have descended on New Delhi for the G20 summit. The hosts, India, want the group to strike new deals on global debt and climate change. But tensions between members have put that in doubt. Staś Butler brings us this report from New Delhi.
G20 fever has gripped New Delhi. A day before the summit of the world's leading economies formally begins, India's capital is abuzz, with security forces on show, and on every corner, posters bearing pictures of the country's Prime Minister. But behind Narendra Modi's placid smile, there's determination. Never before has India hosted so many leaders from the world's most powerful countries. And for Modi, the summit signifies a geopolitical shift.
21वीं सदी एशिया की सदी है, हम सबकी सदी है.
The G20 is crucial to New Delhi's plans to cast itself as a defender of poorer nations.
So India's primary interest is in delivering a summit that positions itself and Prime Minister Modi in particular as a leader for the global south.
And that has shaped the agenda. The summit will focus on food security, giving loans to developing countries, and battling climate change.
So the idea is to push for a new form of multilateralism, because the Western-led multilateralism hasn't really proven beneficial for these countries.
But familiar tensions threaten to derail those plans. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has divided G20 members, so much that in the run-up to this summit, they failed to sign a single joint statement. And with Vladimir Putin absent, and China's Xi Jinping skipping the event too, the prospects for breaking the impasse seem slim.
If this doesn't descend into kind of everybody throwing spitballs at everybody else and being somewhat civil, then we might want to consider that as progress.
As India strives to cement itself as a global leader, it's working to make sure this summit is not the first to end without a final communiqué. But with global powers their most divided for years, this G20 gathering may not end with the flourish New Delhi hopes. Leon Lien, TaiwanPlus and Staś Butler in New Delhi for TaiwanPlus.
Coming up after the break, hundreds are evacuated from their homes after a construction project heavily damages nearby apartment blocks in Taipei.
For more stories from Taiwan and around the world, download the TaiwanPlus app.
In the face of adversity, the power of truth.
A roadmap for a just and open world, charted by the freest country in Asia.
Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
TaiwanPlus News, a voice of freedom in Asia.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. Over 350 people in Taipei have been evacuated from their apartments. Nearby construction work is believed to have destabilized the buildings, causing them to lean. Residents say they had complained for months, but the city government said they had nothing to worry about. John Van Trieste has more.
People in this Taipei neighborhood came home to this on Thursday evening. Just after 8:30, the fire department got a call saying about 6 apartment blocks had started leaning and some had partially collapsed. No one was hurt, but 367 people have been evacuated. Officials, including Taipei's mayor, have inspected the scene. He says a nearby construction project is to blame.
现场因为往下开挖3层，但是并没有马上做这个大底，所以造成现在目前了解是连续壁都破裂，所以我们即刻的用灌浆的方式让压力再把它撑回。
But to people in this neighborhood, none of this is news. Residents say they've seen cracks forming in their walls for months. They signed a petition 8 months ago to have someone look into the damage. The response wasn't what they expected.
他应该先来看一下，他没有看呢，就来了公文说无关。这一点我们觉得施工的就是管理单位啊，没有尽到责任。
City Councilor Chen Yijun says she's found this written response from the city. She also says even the evacuation order came later than it should have.
他们里面内部的工人赶快疏散，那已经疏散了半个小时之后，才通知这边的住户要疏散，所以这里的住户相当的生气，认为他们简直就是草菅人命。
The company behind the project, Kitai Properties, has apologized and stopped work. It says it's insured and will take responsibility. But as the damage is appraised, the people who live here are left to settle into hotel rooms and figure out what comes next. Joseph Wu and John Van Trieste in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
The president of Japan's largest boy band agency has apologized and stepped down over allegations of the company's founder sexually abused young stars. Johnny Kitagawa is accused of sexually abusing hundreds of trainees under his management, with the claim spanning 60 years. Kitagawa's niece, who went on to run the agency, apologized to her uncle's victims during a news conference that was televised live by most broadcasters. Kitagawa died in 2019 and was never charged. Hong Kong is recovering from record-breaking rainfall which caused flooding across the city. Weather officials say that the rainfall was caused by the remnants of Typhoon Haikui, which made landfall in China on Tuesday. Streets were flooded and dozens of cars have been submerged. It's thought to be the highest hourly rainfall in the area since 1884. Hong Kong's stock market and schools have closed as recovery begins. August was the world's hottest on record, making the summer of 2023 the planet's hottest summer since records began. Scientists say burning fossil fuels is the main reason for the climate crisis. Sally Jensen has more.
Hundreds of people in Thessaly needed to be rescued after what's been called the worst flood in Greece's history. Extreme rain in the country's agricultural hub brought down buildings and bridges, turning streets into deadly rivers and villages into lakes.
Η κατάσταση είναι δραματική. Το βλέπετε και οι ίδιοι με τα μάτια σας. Τα νερά είναι τόσο πολλά που δεν περιγράφεται.
Τα πιτσιρίκια μου τα έχει γειτόνισσα εκεί ψηλά. Δεν ξέρω. Ό,τι πιο δύσκολο έχω ζήσει.
The devastating floods followed record-breaking wildfires, a result of heat waves and drought, which can also make flooding worse as the soil becomes too hard to absorb heavy rainfall. This is just one of many instances of extreme weather seen around the world this week, and scientists say these events are turbocharged by global heating. They've confirmed that the summer of 2023 was the planet's hottest since records began. The 3-month period from June through August surpassed previous records by a large margin, with a global average summer temperature of 16.8 degrees Celsius, 0.66 degrees above the average of previous decades. And as the planet heats up, extreme weather becomes more intense, destructive, and unpredictable. Scientists say the global climate and ecological emergency is largely caused by burning fossil fuels, coal, oil, and gas, which releases greenhouse gases into the atmosphere.
As long as we continue to burn fossil fuels, these events will become more and more frequent. So we definitely have to get used to them. But if we don't stop burning fossil fuels soon, they might not be the new normal, but the new cool extremes.
Fossil fuel companies made profits in the hundreds of billions of dollars last year. And despite saying they're committed to lowering carbon emissions, few of them are effectively doing so. The people most vulnerable to the effects of the climate crisis are the least responsible.
Δυστυχώς φτάσαμε στο σημείο περαιτέρω. Γεμίσαν τα σπίτια μας νερά, τα χωράφια, οι περιουσίες των ανθρώπων χάθηκαν. Δεν ξέρω, είναι μια δύσκολη, πάρα πολύ δύσκολη χρονιά.
At the rate things are going, scientists say things could only get worse, and unless drastic changes are made, extreme weather will only bring on more disaster. Andy Scher and Sally Jensen for TaiwanPlus.
The Under-18 Baseball World Cup has entered the next stage with Taiwan at the top of the standings. What's needed for the team to win it all? I bring you this inside look. 12 countries, hundreds of players, and 50 games, all here in Taiwan. The standings for the Under-18 Baseball World Cup are taking shape. The tournament's opening round is over, and now it's time to see who goes on to the finals. In the opening round, 12 countries were divided into 2 groups, A and B. Teams faced off against other countries in their group. Then the top 3 performers from each group moved on to the super round, while the bottom 3 moved to the placement round to determine their final standing. Countries that make the super round play 3 more games, and the top 4 teams in that stage move on to the championship final and bronze medal game. Team Taiwan is moving on to the super round with a perfect 5-0 record from the opening stages. But its real test begins now because Taiwan's under-18 baseball stars will have to face off against the competition's best as they go for gold. For its first game in the super round, Taiwan faced off against last year's tournament winner, Team USA. This game was a rematch of sorts as Taiwan was last year's runner-up. And what a game it was. Team Taiwan beat the USA 3-0. Pitchers Zhang Junwei and Sun Yilei held their opponents scoreless. Meanwhile, Wang Nianhao, Taiwan's captain, batted in all 3 of his team's runs, including a 2-run home run to left field.
First 冲刺，拼他有没有漏接，就飞就飞出去，就当下也是很开心啊！我终于起到带头的作用了，对吧？
Thanks to its perfect record, Team Taiwan had a 2-win advantage going into the super round. Now, with its latest triumph over Team USA, Taiwan has a 3-0 record in the super round. If it can keep up the momentum, gold will be within the team's reach, and winning the U18 at home will make victory all the sweeter. Taiwan's top female weightlifters have been dominating international competitions this year. Our reporter Sandy Chi did the heavy lifting on this story.
Taiwanese Olympic gold medalist Guo Xingchun has defended her title as the country's top female weightlifter. On Thursday, she led the group stage of women's 59-kilogram weight class at the World Weightlifting Championships in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Guo lifted 101 kilograms in the snatch and 130 kilograms in the clean and jerk, for a combined total weight of 231 kilograms. Guo's impressive performance comes despite having to balance her training with physical therapy.
因为幸存最近的练习呢是练的不是非常的多，因为本身有一些伤势必须要处理，因此呢就是边练边调整，边练边复健。
Two more groups in Guo's highly competitive weight class are still competing. Whether Guo can stay on top depends on the final results, expected this weekend. Guo's performance follows a clean sweep in Riyadh by rising star Chen Guanling. Chen set national records in May and took all 3 gold medals for her category in 2 other international championships this year. She graduated high school in June.
非常恭喜我们这次冠领选手，拿了3面的金牌，称霸女子55公斤级别。而且呢，最主要是她的年纪只有18岁，对这种成绩是非常好的。希望她将来的以后呢，能够真正成为中华队的顶梁柱。
Guo and Chen's performance leaves little doubt that they can carry the weight for Team Taiwan's female division. Scott Wong and Zanny Chi for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. Remember to download the TaiwanPlus app for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally today, we leave you with images of Ninja Turtles leaving handprints on Hollywood Boulevard right where they should be. I'm Leslie Liao. Take care and see you next time.